Okay, so welcome to our webinar this morning from spreadsheet to structured inventory with Totuus. So we're looking forward to presenting the subject to you. Just a couple of housekeeping notes before we start. The chat is available to you to ask questions. So please feel free just to drop a question in there. If I can answer it as I go through, then I will. Or if we just need to take that away and come back to you with an answer, we will as well. But for the purpose of the chat during the session, all questions, all chats are anonymized, so don't need to worry about having your name against them. Feel free to just ask the questions. We'll follow them up generically. So that just gives us a bit of protection that side of things. We recognise, obviously, the challenges that customers have in this particular areas and the general outcomes that they're looking to try and achieve. So as we go through, we'll try and focus on some of those challenges. We'll look at how we can potentially help with those challenges with the Totuus product. But more than anything is really just to help you understand how we're helping customers come from sort of disorganized data, spreadsheet formats into a structured inventory. With the experience we have with our customers in doing so. So just in case you can't read, my name is Swainson, Head of Technology and Development, and I'll be conducting the webinar for us this morning. Now, whilst it's not our intention to dwell too much on the CMDB element of the journey, the end goal, if you like, to have a CMDB, so not spending too much time on the subject matter of CMDB, we just wanted to emphasize the importance and highlight the role of the CMDB within your environment, and to emphasize that really a CMDB is only useful when it reflects reality and that it can be maintained over time, which is probably the biggest challenge that our customers have, and particularly when we step back in a moment to the spreadsheet situation, where that is obviously very keenly felt. So when customers have a mature CMDB where they can ask questions and get the answers that they need about relationship mapping, current state assessments, root cause analysis, those types of things, enrichment, then that's obviously the role of the CMDB, this trusted inventory that we desire to achieve. But of course, there are challenges to that, depending on where you are in your maturity journey. And the emphasis of our webinar this morning is to take the thought from the spreadsheet side of things, moving forward into having a structured inventory, into a set of data that you can trust. Now, it's often, for obvious reasons, the first place that organizations start. They'll often just record inventory information in those spreadsheets. And for obvious reasons, it works well. It does the job. Maybe we've even got a little bit more clever with it. We've started putting macros in there, or maybe we've using an Access database and we've got a little bit of a front end on it. And it works. It works for a period. It works particularly well if an organization remains small, and that's specifically small within the IT requirement. But over time, data can become harder to maintain. Maybe multiple versions start to emerge. Different teams start to have their own version of a spreadsheet, or maybe just maintaining version control becomes difficult. So the focus of our webinar today is if you find yourself in that position, that the data is becoming harder to maintain, perhaps departments are attempting to maintain their own data, not just because they want to, but because they have to. They don't find that one standard spreadsheet fits their requirements, so they've got their own versions, etc. Or maybe even worse, that there are multiple versions of the same set of data emerging, and so we just simply don't know what is the latest source of truth. And we found that when we're talking to our customers, that this leads to a lack of trust in the data. It becomes something that we can't rely on. So after a little while, it doesn't even get referred to. It's not even something we reference anymore. So the question is, at this point, what do we do now? How do we get from where we are to where we would desire to be, to have a set of data which can be trusted and effectively is always the first port of call whenever we need to deal with any type of question related to our environment. Probably you recognize the issue, and so therefore you start to realize that you need to have a CMDB project of some shape moving forward. And if that's where you're at, really that's what this webinar is about. And also we would just love to be able to talk with you, help you if possible on that journey to getting to a point where you can rely on the data. Now, just because we have a CMDB tool doesn't mean that the problem will always go away. And that's because CMDB projects themselves can stall and fail for the very same reasons that we started them in the first place. Unless it's something that we can maintain, unless it's something that's usable, that's always going to be our source of truth. If the stale becomes data, if the data becomes stale, we get a loss of trust in the CMDB. So again, it becomes sidelined. So the one thing that we really want to get across as a message and really trying to help our customers with is that yes, tooling matters, because if you need a tool that's going to enable you to get from where you are to where you want to be, rather than necessarily saying, well, this is where you want to be, so shape everything into that model. So the tooling does matter, and that's a story and a journey that we can assist our customers with in Totuus. But probably as important, if not even more so, is the sequence of that data maturity journey to get from where you are to where you want to be, and to make sure that it's maintainable and something that we can then rely upon and then obviously trust. So let's just step back for a second into the spreadsheets situation, because obviously that's what we've kind of headlined with regards to this webinar. Spreadsheet drift, but this can be applied to pretty much any type of data you might already have. There may be multiple versions. There may be different emerging requirements for different types of data to be stored, which doesn't quite meet or line up with the data set that you've already got. So another version emerges. And there becomes almost like different sources of truth. And so therefore, as we said, the confidence fails. But the question really is, when we want to go from that situation to having a reliable source of truth, is there a single source of truth? Or probably more likely, is there an element of truth within all of these data sources that we can try and extract and tie together to give us some kind of consistency? So just as a little bit of a visual, this is the type of things that we see very often, even just things like naming conventions, field names, maybe even mismatching data. We need to just analyze all of that to find out where those gems of truth lie, so that we can then move forward to getting a clean governed inventory record. Now, at this point, you may even be ready to actually start benefiting from a clean governed inventory record. There may be opportunities for some kind of integrations for automations, because we can now rely on this data. It may be that we can bring in sources of information from elsewhere to tie in. But once we've got this data, this is effectively our starting point. But even at this point, you are not really ready for a full CMDB engagement. And it's at this point that we can assist our customers getting to here, finding those gems of truth, surfacing those, making them as core records, and then augmenting them with the elements of truth from our other areas as well. And we'll show a little bit about that in the live demo as we move forward. And then the next question is, okay, once we've got that structured inventory, what else might it be able to do? This is the beginning of your journey. Once you've got this structured device classification, validated names, normalizing information, etc., bringing that information together, what else do we have in the organization which might be something that we can we can now bring together in a single source. So going beyond the spreadsheets, looking at, okay, do we have some other tools out there? Maybe it's things like discovery tools, network management platforms. Maybe there's some useful synergy between those two platforms now. ITSM platforms, enrichment of data as alarms and tickets are raised. We can use this digitized form of our data to have a single source of truth to assist in these other platforms. But they can also provide data which can help us to enrich our inventory, to provide this trusted data record that can then be digitized in our platform. And this is where we start to become CMDB ready. And we might even now start to learn or even be able to import relationships between these things, and then start to ask the question, so what? Okay, so what do we need to know? So reporting and automation layers that can then be kind of added over the top. So the whole thing really is this maturity journey, the maturity path of where we are with the data that we have, and bringing it forward to a point where it becomes operational intelligence. And that's the journey we want to be able to assist our customers with. Now, before we jump into a live demo, I just want to spend a minute or two talking about domains or data demarcation. Obviously, our desire is to work towards a single CMDB, a single source of truth, which is going to provide the organization with the answers to its questions. But just on occasions, it might be that for one reason or another, we can't do that. We can't have one single CMDB. Maybe because of business structure, maybe because of standards-based environments such as CNI. Or perhaps you're an MSP and you're managing customers' environments, and you find that you can't have a one-size-fits-all, even if you have role-based access, which means they only get access to their own devices. The things that one customer needs to store against another customer, they're at different points in their maturity journey. You can't fit them all into this one box. So again, having a platform that would allow you to have one system, but to define data structures in a way which is consistent with the data that's being stored, and then potentially having them automatically update master inventories or master CMDBs over the top where required, is really the core foundation part of Totuus. Which we call domains. And this is where we'll start our live demonstration in a moment. But it also gives us the ability to allow for our own SaaS solution to be multi-tenanted without risk. Data is completely separated in the back end within those domains and completely separately configurable. So we can have one platform, one administered platform, with potentially multiple tenancies through those domains with separate configurations as required. So where we can't head towards that single source of truth with the CMDB for the single organization, just because of the way we're structured, it's not that we're not flexible to match up with what's needed. And then that starts to sort of raise all sorts of ideas in our mind about how that might change the way we approach this whole subject sort of moving forward. So in the live demonstration, we're going to be watching out for a number of those elements that we've mentioned, we've set up, talking about starting with a minimal set of data, not being forced into a whole CMDB relationship mapped data set, which we're just not ready for, with the ability to mature that data over time from other sources, and then to gradually configure that information over time to a point where we've got the data maturity that we can rely on. So I'm just going to stop sharing that there for a second and then switch over to my demo platform. And that is there. Okay. So I've logged into here our lab version of Totuus. and I've just gone on to our domains configuration. So I'm logged in as an administrator. So you can see who I'm logged in as there. So I've gone to our domain section, and you can see that we have a number of domains which are configured here and manageable from here. So a domain effectively consists of a database connection. So where are we going to connect for this data? What type of database are we connecting to? So you can have everything central and you can have everything on one database type, but again, we're not restricting. So if you want to have data for a particular domain stored on a location, as long as it's routable back to the main system, then you can. And it doesn't matter if that's an Oracle or MariaDB or MySQL or Postgres. We don't care. That's where we will store the domain, and the domain is the CMDB, the inventory of where you're going to store your data. So there's complete domain backend data separation between these environments, even though I'm managing and looking at everything through one single user portal. So it consists of that. It also consists of some configuration around cryptography. So when we're encrypting things in the database, so I won't show that on screen for obvious reasons, but encryption keys, algorithms that we'll use for encryption, etc., within the database itself. If we want to have a different landing page than the standard one for a particular domain, when somebody comes in and it's their default domain, this will be the landing page, and you can configure how that all works, etc. And various different settings that go with that domain. So these are just some simple settings that can be applied. Things like password policies, if you're using password of last resort, your journaling policies, how we log and store information for activity within the domain, which is obviously a key part of inventory management, managing change. Some settings for some different capabilities within the product, including IPAM, etc. So if you have a different requirement for either a different customer or a different part of your organization, then it's possible to set up a domain for exactly that. So when I first come into the product, I would, as I'm on the Kedron domain, you can see this was our landing page. And then I have at the top the option to select whichever domain I have access to that I want to work within. So if I wanted to work within a different domain, then I simply select it, and it takes me, switches everything in the back end. Now I'm looking at a completely different database in the back end operating against that. So we have a local central database, which gives us that collective admin function management and how we connect to the other databases, but the actual data stored remotely in those domain databases. So all sorts of different use cases for that, but that has been the foundation stone for building Totuus to make sure we have that capability. So now when it comes to getting data into our system, we then will decide whether that's going to be something that we bulk upload through spreadsheet templates. So exactly starting from where we are right now with our spreadsheets, is that these can be directly through template formatting uploaded into the Totuus platform. But before we do that, we obviously want to make sure that we've got a target for each of those bits of information. So if it's a device name, if it's a serial number, or whatever it might be that we're trying to record, we need to make sure we have those, what we call attributes, in the platform. So if I go to a very simple one, it's a simple domain, and in here we don't have any devices yet, or CIs. So if I go to add a CI, you'll see here that it's got a very small set of attributes, things like device name, device type, which is something that we can drop down. We'll show how these are configured in a moment. Things like the vendor, the IP address, whether the field is mandatory, whether it's a drop down, whether it's something we associate. Again, we'll talk about that. But a very simple set of data. And if that captures everything that you've got, that's fine. You can start from a very small set, but then you start to grow the number of attributes that you want to maintain against a record. Now, at this point, this is what we call an inventory domain, it is very, very networky based. It's very device specific. As you move towards a full CMDB domain, then we start to give you the ability to have a CI to be any kind of classification that you want. It's not necessarily networky based. So as we start with the network inventory out of our spreadsheets, and we start to then say, actually, I want to start looking at adding services and managing a service as a CI. And I start to get into the full definition of the ITIL CMDB, then we would switch to a CMDB domain, and that progress maturity would continue. Though we're not looking to get there today. But to add to our set of attributes doesn't require a DBA to do that. Everything is configurable through the user interface as long as you have the role-based access to do this. So if I go to my UI and models here, you'll see that I have the control over attributes, models, tabs, associations, so everything is configurable through here. So if I wanted to add a tab at the bottom with some extra attributes in there, then I can. If I want to control and modify, let's say, things like the device type, then I can simply go to my attributes, look for type, here's device type, and then I can add to this list, remove from the list, modify the list entirely as I want to. So if, let's say, I'm going to get rid of P server and V server, so physical and virtual, then I could say, right, well, this one is just going to become server from now on, and then this one is going to be removed. And then I would just simply save and exit that. So very easy to manage and configure and add to our list of attributes through the user interface. As I say, adding attributes is just a simple form that you need to fill out with your choices. So what's it going to be called? What's the label? What type of data are we expecting to record? Control the length of that data, validate the data. So this steps us back into what we said about spreadsheets. Sometimes you have one sheet with one set of naming convention, another one with another, or not even any convention whatsoever. The validation regex gives us the ability to say, okay, well, it must all be capitalized, or it can only ever be lowercase, and we can only use these characters, or it must always start with this value. Then the validation regex gives us the ability to control exactly what that data would look like. Now, the seeded attributes that we provide for things like IP addressing and the like, they come with their own validation regex applied already, which you can obviously tweak if you wish. But as you add your own, you can feel free to add your own regex validation as you want to. So you can control the type of data, the length of the data, and also validate it against your own regular expressions as well. Or even provide a fixed, as we've already seen, a fixed list of drop-down values that the customer can use, so the user can use as they go in, and they can only select that value, and it keeps it nice and tight on the data set that you're deploying. You can control whether it's mandatory, whether or not it's encrypted in the database, whether it's confidential, doesn't get exposed on screen. Is it searchable? We'll never export it. Is it a unique value, so a type of an asset ID that you want to assign? We can calculate asset IDs and things for you as well automatically. So those things are all available in creating the attributes. Attributes effectively make up everything. So those are there for you to decide. So the next part of it then is to, once we've built out our attribute set, is to understand then whether or not there are things that we can gather that we can associate. So information which is something that can be applied to multiple things. Site is a good example of that. So if I go to inventory here, go to site, let's switch to a domain where we've got a little bit more information in. There we go. So we've got site here, and obviously we've got multiple devices that are on the same site. And so therefore, we can associate this information with our devices. So it's recorded once, so it's consistent and remains consistent. It can be edited in one location and disseminated to everything all at once. And so we can control that type of data that we can potentially associate with other things. And that can be like examples of sites. We've got things like credentials. We've also got things like circuit details here. If we've got, in this case, we've got some SSL certificates that are being recorded. So they're being scanned using another tool. And then that tool pushes the information into Totuus, and then it's associated with the devices. But here we have the actual recording of the whole information. So this is what's being recorded against that SSL certificate, and then associated against the devices where it's needed. Now those things can be done automatically. So if I go to our data connectors here, this is where we start adding in those extra sources of information. So we've got our base set of base devices. If we now have a way of linking information based on things that we already know, so let's say another platform has information about our device based on IP address or based on host name. Again, we can normalize that so we know that we can rely upon that data. So it's always consistent. But as long as there's a way of aligning up or matching up a record by at least one match, two ideally, but at least one, then we can bring that data in, match it, and augment or enrich the record with the information that it holds. So this is where we start bringing in data from those external repositories too. So here's an example of one platform. Just test that it's still alive. Yes, it is. Okay, so this is a connector which has been built to connect to a RESTful interface on a network management platform. And then let's just go and look at the data that's just fetched. So it's returning JSON format, which looks like this when extracted. So we've got a DNS name. So we've now got a DNS entry for our devices, which we can match against the IP address and bring that in. We've got a device model, so that could come in. And we've also got a device state. So we now know from the monitoring platform the status of this device, and therefore that could also go into the CMDB as well. So as you can see, the idea is that we keep layering in on top of the base information, layering in this information to enrich it to the point where we get to a point where we're ready now to start doing things like relationships to services, relationships to other devices in the network, or even now starting to think about splitting up our data to the point where we say, rather than managing things as a device, we now might want to manage things from an asset perspective. So rather than a device being a record, that device could now be the chassis, and it has an association with separately stored records for things like power modules, for memory, for hard drives, that they can all be tracked separately, and so therefore managed throughout their life cycle as well. And talking of life cycle, this is a template that a customer, we worked on with a customer to come off of their spreadsheets. We don't have any data in it, but we do have the template. And so we can see how we've expanded this one to take a lot of CI detail into here, including things, extra information around the site, such as the rack, the use space, the power drawer, etc., and including the lifecycle information. So if we get this level of detail, which again we can help provide, this can be stored against the device, and then we can start asking questions about, well, when are, which devices do I have that need refreshing, replacing, etc., in the next 6 to 12 months, and so on. And those type of questions can be answered by our dashboards. So our inventory dashboards can provide you with the detail of what you have as a whole within the actual CMDB or inventory itself, and then provide you with the detail of the information, which again is exportable and so on. So if you have lifecycle details, we could then start to see that on a dashboard store those dashboards away, ready for people to use as required. And when we get towards the full CMDB, we have all of the full relationship mapping layout. I suppose some people call this digital twin type things, where we can see exactly VMs on physical hardware, what services they're related to, and how everything sort of hangs together. So we can see that this is a physical box. So if I select that, I would get the detail of that. If my VPN was connected, I get the virtual server, and then off the virtual server, I then actually get the service that it has. And then obviously we can build off that who consumes that service and so on. This is where we're heading, but we can start simple and move towards that. And then just a final word really on the domains. If you find yourself in a situation where multiple domains are required, then as part of bringing in data from other sources, we can actually bring in data from other domains. So it might be that you have sort of 4 sort of separate domains within the system. Certain information between domain A and domain B are things that we want to synchronize between them. It may be that, between C and D, we want to do that. And then from a master domain perspective, everything from A, B, C, and D gets sent up into a master. So operationally, teams can work in the lower levels, but we can pull that information out there as well. As long as there's a source of data to pull in, then these data comms connectors give us the ability to pull that. We just need to create the data store, and therefore tell the system how to find the data, what format it's in, credentials as required, so that we can pull those in. So different types of systems, even Totuus itself, other domains that we can pull information from, and then we create the data connectors as required, and those can be push or pull. So systems can push to Totuus, or Totuus can pull the record, dependent on what we want. And then another advantage over spreadsheets, as we would expect, is all of the user control. So the full RBAC control, so the role-based access. So we can configure that under security. We can create roles within the platform so that every part of Totuus has a role and function. We use the CRUD system, so create, read, update, and delete on every single attribute, every single element of Totuus. And so therefore you can control it very, very tightly on who does what, who sees what, and who can do what within the platform. So you create those roles. So again, a real emphasis over the top of what data we currently are storing in spreadsheets. We have this complete control over who can actually change things, see things, do things within the platform, as so on and so forth. So just switching back to our deck, just to see whether there's questions before I move on any further. So there's a question here. Do you have an on-site version of this tool, or is it all as a service? So Totuus can be consumed as a service. We operate that ourselves, and we work with you along those lines. But Totuus itself can quite happily reside on-prem as well, and does for a number of our customers. So it's completely garden fenced, and they have that internally. We help them manage it where needed. We provide support, but the platform itself can certainly be installed on-prem. So let's just go back to the slides here. Okay. So once we've applied the model and we've got the data, we've already said that asking questions like, well, so what does all that mean? We've got our dashboards, etc. But it also means that we can start looking at enriching other platforms. So ITSM platforms, we can enrich ticket information. We can assist by enriching network management platforms. We can even help by flags that are set automation processes. So one of our integrations with one of our management products, we would just simply have a flag that says it's either in pre-deployment, it's in deployment, or it's been removed. And only at the point where we say it's been deployed does the network management tool start to try and make a discovery of the tool of the device or the platform. And when we say that it's been removed from the network, well, then that tool then kicks off a deletion process and a tidy up of all the data, etc. And so automations and so on can be configured off the back of that as well. So it starts to get easier as the data becomes more trusted. So hopefully from today, our key takeaways is that sequence before sophistication, getting the data right, finding those little gems of truth that you have, combining them together, getting them digitized in a way that is in a simple model. You're not being forced into a very complex CMDB model, helping you along that maturity journey. So as you need more attributes, they're easy to configure, they're easy to add. You don't need a DBA to go in and completely change the database model because you need to start maturing your data. You haven't got to get it right from day one. We can start maturing that through to a point then where we can say you are ready for CMDB, switch you over to a CMDB model, which tracks assets as well as the CIs as a separate entity. And that's the main difference. And then giving you the capability to do that relationship management and classification as well. So, where are you in this maturity journey? That's the key question that we like to ask our customers. Why Totuus? Structured, trusted, easy to access, easy to manage, and relatively inexpensive to get started. And with our SaaS solution and what we're offering as part of this campaign is to assisting you to get from spreadsheets or flat files to a point where you get governed inventory. And that's hosted and managed with a commitment to be live in 30 days with a cap on renewals. So talk to us if it's something that's of interest. If you want more details about the pricing, there is a QR code in the next slide, which you can obviously snap as well. But one key element we often get asked about is AI. We are looking at bringing AI into the tool to help us surface things out of your data, which you might not otherwise have seen, to potentially think about looking at, rather than just it's either mandatory or it's not mandatory, maybe having things which we might say, well, it's recommended you have this piece of information, but then how do we surface all of the, well, we've said this was recommended, but you haven't completed it. So how incomplete is your data and where might that data source come from? So we're looking at things like that as we move forward over our next releases. But the key thing that we really want to, and it's not a question, it's a statement, so my bad. The key thing we want to just get right is that AI is only as good as the data underneath it. So again, it's the same kind of message, governing that inventory, getting the data complete and consistent and reliable before we then start saying, let's throw it into AI and see what it can do. But we certainly are surfacing what we can do with AI moving forward. So if you haven't raised questions to this point, then please feel free to do so. So just one question Q&A as per the question I checked. So yes, so it can be air gapped. Again, we don't need connectivity to the internet. Maybe some of the AI functionality in the future may be designed that way, but it doesn't mean that it can't work with a ring-fenced AI. And we do have customers that are air gapping the solution completely. Yeah. And as we've gone through, we have talked about ITSM. We have talked about integration with things like ticketing systems and so on. But it might also be that you have specific requirements around ITSM. Maybe you've already got an ITSM solution in place and you simply want to either take data from it or enrich data into it. Again, those are things that we can assist with within the Totuus journey. One of the things that we do with a number of our customers already is, from a management platform perspective, is that when the management platform creates an alarm, it recognizes an issue, but there's an integration between it and Totuus to grab an enrichment set of data, which is then passed across and pushed on up into the ITSM platform for an enrichment of what we already know in the CMDB or in the inventory. So those things are possible too. Okay, so those seems to be the questions that we have. So at this point, for me, just to say thank you. I think that's about our time done. I appreciate you attending and for the questions that you had. If there is any interest on taking the conversations any further, then please do be in touch with us to see what we can do to assist and help. But we appreciate your time. Thank you very much.